are very confusing to Westerners, so it's our job to try and understand it rather than just simply reacting in a very kind of reflexive manner. That's my view on that.
Yeah, no, I think we should try and help people understand it, but I also think that it's important to understand that the most important thing is that NATO allies and the governments, the NATO governments, have been instigating this, and I consider all this blood to be on their hands. I consider this to be their fault, and they could stop it right now. They could take the L and cede back to the Russian sphere of influence the eastern half of Ukraine, and that would end this war, where the people there are Russian speaking, and frankly, you could even save face by doing it by simply holding a vote, an actual open vote.
Why do you think they did the coup in 2014?
Because
if
they lost
hold the vote, they'll lose.
Well, this was my point: is that they
did the color revolutions before,
right?
And every single one of the liberal candidates that were installed in these coups was voted out, and today have no place in Ukrainian society because they were so filthy and corrupt. People don't, even in the Ukraine, they don't actually want. Now they have a budding bugman class in Kiev and places like that, but they don't have.
They've been cultivating that for the last 8 years.
Values of the average Ukrainian are closer to the values of the average Russian than they are to the Western NGOs. It's just a fact.
The thing is that so in 2005, I believe, they had their color revolution and they installed Viktor Yushchenko in president, but he didn't win the election. Right. The election was actually won by slim majority by Viktor Yanukovych, and then the West said, "Well, you need to have like a runoff because of the you need to have a runoff election because no one got like 50%, like something like one guy got 39.4 and the other guy got like 39.2% of the vote or something like that. So Yanukovych won by like a hair thin majority or plurality rather." And so they had some runoff, and I don't know how they did it. They installed Yushchenko in president, right? They installed him somehow. They managed to through GAOPS, get him to win.
There were multiple color revolutions in Ukraine.
Right.
And so the thing is, project for many, many years.
In 2010, they ran Yulia Tymoshenko, who is Jewish. Ukraine,
is she?
Yes. Yulia Tymoshenko is now. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. I believe that she is.
I don't think so.
I have read that she was. Or she might be. Let me just look it up. Anyway, she was like an oil and gas magnate. I remember reading at the time before this was even a big deal.
Let me hit that early life. Yeah. That's not always reliable.
Yeah.
It says her grandfather. Yes, you're right.
Yeah, no, they were advertising her.
Her paternal
as a Jew.
grandfather was Abraham Kapfelman.
Okay, well, that's a very Jewish name.
A Jew from Western Ukraine.
I don't know how Jewish she is, but they were advertising her in the West as Jewish in 2010 during those elections. Now she lost to Yanukovych. He won, and after their gay democracy,
for the record, was the pro-Russian.
Yes,
candidate.
he was a pro-Russian guy. He also was a guy that Paul Manafort was doing PR for. If you remember, they like when they actually came for Paul Manafort because of Trump stuff, they attacked him for having done PR for like this evil Russian dictator guy. But there was nothing particularly bad about Viktor Yanukovych, or certainly nothing worse. I mean, I'm sure he was corrupt.
All he did was lean towards a decision to join a customs union with Belarus and Russia and other countries versus joining the EU.
Well,
he
refused to sign. Yeah, the Maidan protests, which was an intelligence operation, was triggered when he refused to sign the statement of understanding or agreement with the EU, which was like a precursor to joining the EU. And then when he did that, how many people now? Even people in Ukraine, and you can actually look. I remember looking during all these operations, looking at the map of Ukraine. And it would be fairly split right down the middle, right? The river that runs through the middle of Ukraine. Right down the middle would be fairly split. Like one side, they would typically do blue and yellow. Like blue would be Russia, yellow would be Ukrainian. In terms of how they would color code these maps in the Western media. So like the East would be blue and the West would be yellow. Like that was just how it went, right? And it makes sense. Yeah. And you'd always have an Enko versus a Vich, right? A Vich being Russian and Enko being Ukrainian. Right.
I sent you the link for anyone out there that seriously believes that the Maidan was this organic thing, that audio is Victoria Nuland essentially directing it. That is the Jew Victoria Nuland from the State Department directing the coup.
Right. So I got it playing right here.
What do you think?
I think we're in play. The Klitschko piece is obvious.
Let me see. Let me put this up on the video.
Yeah, that way you can see the text.
Yeah, so I gotta do this for a second. 1 second.
This is from February 2014.
Yes. Oh gosh, that's wrong. 1 second. Sorry. This is as usual bad prep. Okay, so here we are.
The complicated electron here, especially the announcement of him as deputy prime minister, and you've seen some of my notes on the troubles in the marriage right now, so we're trying to get a read really fast on where he is on this stuff.
So the text says, for people listening, Assistant Secretary of State Victoria Nuland and Ambassador Jeffrey Pyatt, or I don't know, Pyatt, speaking about U.S. strategy for a political transition in Ukraine, which includes a crude swipe at the European Union. Ha!
But I think your argument to him, which you'll need to make, I think that's the next phone call we want to set up, is exactly the one you made to Yachts. And I'm glad you sort of put him on the spot on where he fits in this scenario. And I'm very glad he said what he said in response.
Good. So I don't think Klitsch should go into the government. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's a good idea.
Klitsch is Klitschko.
Yeah, that's funny.
That's Klitschko. Go ahead. So he's a CIA asset.
Klitschko was a leader of Maidan.
Yes, him and that
today
Panettiere were there like the Eva and Juan Perón of the Maidan.
No.
They were there like the power.
Yes,
couple.
they were. Today they're talking
CIA
about
assets.
Today they're talking about Vitaly Klitschko. The romantic images of him with a scarf and a bullhorn in Maidan Square.
Right.
Like leading these crowds and blah, 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 right?
And let me just tell you something very, very direct here. Anytime you see an American celebrity going abroad to meet a dictator or meet a political leader that's on the bad side of America, that's oftentimes a CIA project for intelligence gathering.
Well, like I was saying,
so Dennis Rodman in Korea, Dennis Rodman hanging out with Kim. Now, Kim loves basketball. Right. So he's meeting Dennis Rodman. The CIA knows this. You better believe Dennis Rodman gave him a full rundown on his mindset. He gave him a full rundown on what he's planning, what he thinks, and so on and so on. Right. And I'm sure Kim himself knew that. So
yeah, they probably knew that.
I have my suspicions of maybe Steven Seagal. I could be wrong about him, but I know for a fact that these are America uses its celebrities to go and meet these. Because, of course, everyone in the world, even Kim, even Putin, they're all weak in the knees for American action movies and
Well, Vitaly Klitschko is actually Ukrainian, though. And
yes, he's an American-sponsored. He fights in America.
Obviously, but he spent most of his life in Germany.
Right.
When he was fighting, it's also funny because right now ESPN is running like these glowing biopics of him and his brother, who are both boxers. But when they were boxing, they would always be rooting for the nigger against them, like all the coverage of ESPN.
Right,
I mean, boxing friends of mine have said it's really funny to see Western media praising Vitaly Klitschko because it used to be that all the white racists would be rooting for him to beat the shit out of whatever nigger in the boxing matches, and all the Western media would be rooting for for whatever nigger. And there's funny people are posting funny videos in this group of old ESPN and like British also British sports news clips of all these Western like Brit announcers or ESPN announcers just like making the case for why this time Klitschko is going to lose, this time the nigger is going to beat him, and all this shit, and how this particular nigger or whatever can beat Klitschko and whatever is very funny. And then it turns out he agreed to be.
Ukrainians are now not white in terms of how they're treated. Ukrainians now
they'll be treated as white as soon as they cross the border with Poland.
Right. As soon as they cross the border back into Europe, they're white again.
Right.
That seems to be how I perceive the most anti-white people in the world that now have Ukrainian flags in their profiles. the most vicious, hateful, white, anti-white, want to kill white people. They are all on the Ukrainian side now. So cognitive dissonance, again, you never thought that – I was of the opinion that it would be hard to get bugmen who have been stewing in this anti-white shit for years to sympathize with anyone who's white. I was wrong. They will.
Well, it's just clout.